Hello and thank you for joining us. You're watching Addis News Hour with the news. I'm Tabitha John. Do stay with us. The Ethiopian government today condemned in the strongest terms the theft of 12 tankers with 570,000 liters of fuel by the TPLF from the warehouses of the World Food Programme prior to the new attacks it launched. The statement said the theft of fuel is every bit intended to aid the TPLF's belligerent acts of aggression. Kasahun Jane goes through the rest of the statement. Take a look.
The looting of WFP's warehouses is not only a despicable act by a criminal group. It has been treating in the name of the people of Tigray, but a war crime and violation of international humanitarian law, the statement said. In addition to earlier reports from recent months, yesterday's criminal act is being confirmed by international humanitarian partners, namely the World Food Programme, WFP, and United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, UN OCHA. The looting of fuel and humanitarian aid is without a doubt being used to further the TPLF's recent attack launched in communities around the town of Kobo, the statement says. Reports also confirmed that the TPLF not only looted but also imprisoned staff members of humanitarian partners who resisted the looting, according to the government communication service. It is to be recalled that the Ethiopian government has taken steps to facilitate the unhindered flow of humanitarian assistance to the people in the Tigray state since the conflict began. It said that the government further enhanced its support through the enactment of the humanitarian truce. Furthermore, in recent months, the confidence-building measures taken by the government, a peaceful resolution of the conflict, and expediting assistance to people in the region have rebuffed by the TPLF, the statement indicated. Most recently, the Director General of the World Health Organization, vociferous and embattled proponent of the TPLF, utilized the WHO's platform in an unethical manner to claim that fuel shortage was hampering the delivery of humanitarian aid. However, the reality on the ground, as demonstrated in yesterday's theft, clearly shows the global community continued weaponizing of aid by the TPLF to further its political and military agenda. The government has been warning the international community on multiple occasions and continuously that the TPLF has been looting fuel and humanitarian aid in Tigray since the beginning of the conflict in 2020. Independent corroborated research reports have further supported these claims. Tragically for the Ethiopian people, these calls and warnings have fallen on deaf ears and no action has been taken to address these crimes, whereas the weaponizing of aid by TPLF and the active siphoning assistance away from intended beneficiaries and the Tigray state is a common path taken by TPLF since the 1980s. What was confirmed yesterday has now visibly become too conspicuous to miss. The Ethiopian government unequivocally demands the return of the stolen fuel and requires the international humanitarian community to take serious actions. It also demands the exercise of honesty and transparency concerning the above-mentioned confirmed reports and evidence. Addis Ababa expects the international community to hold the TPLF accountable. It has to provide guarantees that humanitarian assistance is indeed reaching intended beneficiaries and people in the Tigray state. With a continued firm commitment to the peaceful resolution of the conflict, the government advises the TPLF to cease all hostilities and return stolen humanitarian assistance. Otherwise, the government will force it to take remedial actions at its discretion, the statement added.
Foreign Minister Demeke Mekonnen today met with the diplomatic community based in Addis Ababa to brief them on the state of current affairs in Ethiopia. According to Mekonnen, the federal government has been implementing encouraging peace-building steps to bring about sustainable peace, ending the war in the country's north. He recalled the declaration of the unilateral humanitarian ceasefire and the humanitarian truce, which paved the way for the provision of unrestricted access for humanitarian operators, including more fuel and cash to the Tigray state. Mekonnen also discussed how the government had appointed a high-level peace committee to pursue positive engagement and sincere approaches to the peace discussions. Unfortunately, he said, the TPLF continued to militarize humanitarian supplies that were intended to support civilians while failing to recognize the government's peace measures. He urged the international community to promote the AU-led unconditional peace talks and denounced the TPLF's destructive behavior. Following the announcement by the UN chief spokesperson that the TPLF looted a WFP warehouse in Mekelle, some are expressing doubts as to the sincerity of the statement by UN agencies. It is to be recalled that 8 agencies and international backers of the TPLF ranted about the shortage of fuel, blaming it on Addis Ababa, while we are told all of a sudden that 570,000 liters of fuel was plundered during the break-in by Tigrayan forces. The following reportage by our staff reporter Goshu Melisao elaborates on that issue.
The UN on Wednesday said the TPLF forces stole 12 trucks of fuel from the World Food Programme warehouse in Mekelle. Stephanie Dujarric, spokesperson for the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, told journalists in New York that the Tigrayan forces in the morning of August 24 forcibly entered World Food Programme warehouse in Mekelle and stole 12 truck tankers of oil, or 570,000 liters.
This morning on August 24th, a World Food Programme warehouse in Mekelle was forcibly entered by Tigrayan forces, who took 12 fuel trucks, tankers, with 570,000 liters of fuel. The team on the ground unsuccessfully tried to prevent this looting. These stocks of fuel were to be used solely for humanitarian purposes, with the distribution of food, fertilizer, and other emergency relief items. This loss of fuel will impact humanitarian operations in supporting communities in all of northern Ethiopia.
World Food Programme Executive Director David Beasley tweeted that the TPLF looted 12 full tankers with 570,000 liters of fuel in Mekelle as outrageous and disgraceful. However, the international communities and aid agencies, including the WFP, have for quite long been accusing Ethiopia of blocking fuel to Tigray. The aid agencies were flanked in this barefaced lie by the likes of the embattled WHO chief Tedros Adhanom. During the recent visit to Tigray by the representatives of the EU and the UN, the concocted fuel shortage was given much attention. Now, the WFP is reporting that 570,000 liters of fuel which was stored in its Mekelle warehouse is looted by the TPLF militants. If we were to believe their previous statements regarding the shortage of fuel, how come this huge amount of petrol be stuffed in their warehouse? This seems to be the million-dollar question that some aid agencies need to respond. A probable poll could be underway in which the TPLF is colluding with these aid agencies and is given access to the fuels, but a statement of looting is issued so that the aid agencies ask for more fuel. As the TPLF continues to support its war effort with stolen fuel, the vicious cycle continues. During its invasion in the Amhara region of Ethiopia last year, the TPLF looted US aid warehouses by the admission of the US aid itself. It remains to be seen whether more supplies of fuel will be requested for humanitarian operations or the TPLF will give the 12 trucks of fuel back to the WFP. So far, there is no any international organization condemned as the TPLF diverted humanitarian aid for war purpose.
That I stand here before you, bearing witness to this momentous day, which marks the birth of a new era for this great nation.
Ensuring peace and security across the nation should be the top priority of the new government.
From the Ministry of Agriculture, from the Minister himself, The country has prepared about 13.2 million hectares of land for crop production, out of which 12 point something has been. In general, 93% is going to produce, and we expect 374 million.
Certain fundamental issues that are basics, that are necessary to launch the country towards democracy and prosperity. So in that regard, I think building national consensus on the fundamentals. Naturally, we cannot agree on everything.
Welcome back. The Ethiopian Citizens for Social Democracy Party, Izima, condemned the resurgence of aggression in the north by the TPLF. In a statement it issued, Izima, the biggest multi-ethnic opposition party in the country, recalled that the TPLF has always been steeped in anti-peace initiatives, adding this salient feature has become more conspicuous than ever during the past few years. Calling on the people of Tigray to understand the true face of the TPLF, Izima called upon all Tigrayans to say no to the mass conscriptions and destructive invasions by this terrorist group. Izima cautioned that when too much of a peace overture goes unreciprocated by the TPLF, the government must be on the alert to thwart aggressions by coordinating all resources at its disposal. The party urged all Ethiopians to stow away any political or other differences and stand in unison against the TPLF's aggression. It said the people must do so without being disturbed by unconfirmed and negative propaganda popping up from every direction. It finally expressed resolve to contribute its fair share in the fight against the TPLF and other historical enemies of the nation. TPLF's another round of aggression is putting it under increasing condemnations across the globe. Various activists and political observers across the globe are shocked and dismayed by the TPLF's fresh war of aggression. They indicated that the TPLF bought time while mobilizing resources and pressing ahead with conscription of youth while preaching peace talks until the opportune moment came to invade Ethiopia. Shagau Yamato has more on that. Take a look.
Anne Fitzgerald, a professor of international security at Basile School of International Affairs in Waterloo, Canada, and Anne Garrison, the Geneva-based journalist and author, tweeted on where the TPLF got all the resources to resume war as well as its resistance to the peace process. Meanwhile, U.S. Congressmen Gregory Meeks and Michael Mikol, chair and ranking member of the House of Foreign Affairs Committee, said looting of humanitarian warehouses are unacceptable in their statement regarding the current situation in Ethiopia on Wednesday. Anne Garrison, the Geneva-based journalist and author, tweeted where the TPLF got all the resources to start another war. The journalist said if Tigray is suffering terrible deprivation, where do the TPLF find the resources? She explained that war requires constant resupply of weapons, munitions, vehicles, food, emergency trauma care, and intelligence technology as war is expensive. The United Nations reported on Wednesday that the World Food Programme warehouse in Mekelle, Ethiopia was forcibly entered by Tigrayan forces who took 12 fuel tankers with 570,000 liters of fuel. Her question might get responses for the start of the war. Similarly, Anne Fitzgerald, a professor of international security and the director of Basile School of International Affairs in Waterloo, Canada, tweeted concerning the TPLF's another war aggression. She says the news is tragic as much as it is expected. The recent TPLF statements, its resistance to the peace process and heightened disinformation warfare sadly all pointed to this. As to her, this is the outcome of a one-sided ceasefire. Meanwhile, on the 24th of August 2022, the U.S. Congressmen Gregory Meeks and Michael Mikol, chair and ranking member of the House of Foreign Affairs Committee, said looting of humanitarian aid are unacceptable in their statement regarding the current situation in Ethiopia. The United Nations reported on Wednesday that a World Food Programme warehouse in Mekelle, Ethiopia, was forcibly entered by Tigrayan forces who took 12 fuel tankers with 570,000 liters of fuel. The representative said all acts of aggression and sabotage, including the looting of humanitarian commodities, are unacceptable and only prolong the suffering of vulnerable populations already facing a dire humanitarian crisis in Ethiopia. They also urged the TPLF to de-escalate tensions immediately, adhere to the ceasefire, and return to the negotiating table, adding that they call on their partners in the international community to remain focused on promoting a peaceful end to the crisis. They finally indicated that Ethiopia's future depends on all parties to this conflict operating in good faith and in finding a path to a lasting peace.
Russian ambassador to Ethiopia, Yevgeny Terekin, criticized the theft of 12 tankers containing 570,000 liters of petroleum by the TPLF from a World Food Programme WFP depot in the Tigray region's capital, Mekelle. Ambassador Terekin told the Ethiopian news agency that the storages were intended to help the people's desperate circumstances. The peaceful population of Tigray, which is suffering from many man-made and natural tragedies, is meant to get humanitarian aid from these food and fuel storage facilities, he said. According to Ambassador Terekin, no one with any reason would justify such acts, and so he cannot conceive how the world community will react to this. He emphasized the fact that the truth would eventually come to light and everyone would comprehend what actually happened and continues to happen, while acknowledging that some sides may want to avoid judgment.
How come last Saturday it issued a letter, and how come it issued a statement calling the TPLF to withdraw its forces from the Amhara and other parts of the country? Can it be trusted?
Yeah, I think this is a long overdue. This should have been recognized by the time the war was started by the TPLF last year.
There are a lot of issues are confusing. Why the military groups are doing this, there is questioned. Even they are fired 6 ambassadors in Khartoum, Sudan, including the US ambassador, the France ambassador, the EU ambassador. All ambassadors are fired by.
Hello and many thanks for joining us. You're watching Addis News Hour with the news. I'm Tabitha John. To stay with us.
Scholars whom ATV approached expressed the need to maintain Irecha for ensuring peace and unity.
Irecha is a very important institution, especially in bringing peace and security, so that it has to be promoted.
This is evidence enough that the TPLF started the war. What are your reflections on that?
Well, the sudden attack of the TPLF on the northern command of Ethiopian army has shocked the Ethiopian society. It has spread a wave of shocks across all social divisions.
In business news, Ethiopia and Tanzania are exchanging experiences on land, water and pasture management since August 22, 2022, based on the agreement signed previously by the Ministry of Animal and Fisheries of Tanzania and Ministry of Irrigation and Lowlands of Ethiopia, MOIL. Ethiopian delegation is led by the Minister of State for Irrigation and Lowlands, Birhanu Lengiso, and is in Tanzania for a 10-day official work visit since August 22, 2022. The delegation is discussing and exchanging experience with the former Dar es Salaam Regional Administration Governor and the current Pawan Regional Administration Commissioner, Abubakar Kunenge, on land, water and pasture management. The delegation is also visiting the works of animal grazing, land development, animal husbandry management, animal marketing, and the development works done in the government and private sectors in Tanzania. The Minister of State and other senior officials and experts from MOIL and experts from other ministries are participating.
Ethiopia is implementing a green legacy initiative over the past 3 years. The nation target is to plant over 20 billion young trees across the country. This project invites neighboring countries like Eritrea, Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, and Kenya.
Ethiopia's microeconomy remains hopeful despite many challenges. ETV English will look into this in greater details through fresh stories and news analysis. Coming to you this August.
In August, top stories on Addis News Hour. After the conflict in the northern parts of Ethiopia, the TPLF is preparing another wage of war against Ethiopia. ETV Language is discussing these matters with professionals, experts, politicians, even government officials. We brought this information on Addis News Hour. Stay tuned to ETV Languages.
And finally, Uganda has removed all tariffs on rice imports from Tanzania as part of efforts to strengthen interregional trade. Under the Common Market Treaty, members of the East African Community signed a pact to remove all trade barriers so as to increase economic integration and development. Kasahun Chani has more from Africa News.
Rice imports from Tanzania are now pouring into the Ugandan market at 0% tax. Richard Beyekwaso hopes to stock up on tonsils rice. He's been importing rice for 5 years now, but he's concerned at the increasing prices in Tanzania.
It's good the taxes have been scrapped, but on the other end, the prices are just going up.
Tax experts say the increase in rice prices in Tanzania is driven by the growing demand for rice in Uganda.
Produce enough even for our own consumption. So who will fill that gap? You have to import. You have a deficit of production or consumption of 230 metric tons. How do you satisfy it?
Beyekwaso imports about 50 tons of rice every week before the tariff was scrapped. He was paying roughly $5 tax for every 100 kilograms sack of rice. This was putting a strain on his profits. Uganda produces about 350,000 metric tons of rice annually, but this is just a fraction of what's needed for local consumption. The deficit is supplemented by imports between 2019 and 2020. Tanzania was Uganda's fastest growing import market for rice. But with East African borders now open, there is growing concern that local producers will be pushed out of business.
To have invested in local production capacities for rice so that they can meet up with the competition from other importing countries. So to the local farmer, it looks as if it's going to disrupt the market. But like I've given you, even what they are producing already is too little to satisfy the local demand.
Uganda is a net importer of rice, most of it coming from Tanzania, Pakistan and Thailand. 2020, Uganda imported rice was 100,000 tons, up from 80,000 tons the previous year.
You're watching Addis News Hour. Here's a reminder of the stories making headlines. TPLF continues weaponizing aid at the expense of the people of Tigray. And TPLF's looting of warehouse in Mekelle draws more condemnations. And that's all we had for now. I'm Tabitha John. Many thanks for watching. Have a good night and do take care.